Yonkai, a mediocre disciple in the High Heaven Pavilion, has been a member for 3 years, but his progress is deplorable. Unlike his peers who have reached higher stages and have been accepted into the main building, he has barely achieved the 3rd stage of tempered body. As a result, he had to accept a demeaning cleaning job in the sect to continue his training. Competition in the High Heaven Pavilion is ruthless. The strong advance and the weak are discarded. If disciples under 14 years old do not surpass the 3rd stage of the tempered body in 3 years, they are expelled or demoted to test disciples who are scorned by everyone. This is the sad reality facing Yonkai, who is the subject of ridicule for his lack of talent. Surrounded by stronger disciples, each one seeks an easy opportunity to face him. Shuo, an ordinary disciple in the 5th stage of the tempered body, is chosen for the duel. In the High Heaven Pavilion, disciples are divided by levels, with central disciples destined to lead. With respect to his opponent, the two begin the duel. Yonkai tries a prolonged strike, but Shuo easily evades and tries to strike with his knee. Yonkai also evades, but both simultaneously throw their fists, resulting in a crash that knocks down Shuo due to his higher tempered body stage. The duel between Shuo and Yonkai was witness to an epic show of determination and sacrifice. While students mocked Shuo, Yonkai rose again and again, putting his rival in a tight spot. With each fall, his determination grew, until Shuo found himself facing an insane opponent unable to surrender. Xia Ningcheng, a special disciple in charge of overseeing victories and points, had witnessed Yonkai's 147 defeats, a number never seen before in the High Heaven Pavilion. She wonders why Yonkai has not deserted. Without knowing how, Yonkai wakes up under a tree, surrounded by kindness and generosity. Someone has moved him to the shade and given him a costly medicine. Grateful, he promises to repay the favor in the future. The fight was a lesson in bravery, determination, and gratitude. He heads towards his humble cabin, applies cream on his wounds, and sleeps to recover using a rock he found in the mountains as a pillow for 2 hours. Then he wakes up disturbed by nightmares and looks at the strange rock he used as a pillow, which begins to shine. Frightened, he chooses to drop it. Upon a second look, he realizes that it's actually a black book. Upon opening it, he discovers that the first page has a strange incantation. Finishing reading the incantation, he wonders if the last phrase is related to his nightmares, and he lets his blood fall onto the text. As a result, the book starts to glow and a skeleton appears in front of Yonkai. The latter cannot prevent the skeleton from invading his body and merging with it. Despite the tearing pain, he tries to resist but unfortunately loses consciousness in the attempt. Upon regaining consciousness, he notices that he feels quite good. Strangely observing the strange book, he discovers that it was built with soul rock, a material too valuable. Upon flipping the pages again, he discovers new pages with text written on them. These are techniques that will help him improve without wasting time. He sets off as he practiced the tempered body techniques included in the book, and he discovered that he is still too weak to use all of his potential, but not all is bad news. As a reward for having practiced to the limit, he manages to overcome his current stage of the tempered body, which causes the expulsion of some impurities contained in his body because he can only practice the techniques for 30 minutes a day. He decides to go back to work. Xia Ningcheng observes Yonkai with a smile on her hidden face. It seems quite strange that Yonkai has been sweeping for an hour in the same place. This changes when Yonkai remembers that it's the 8th day of the month, the monthly day of the contribution points delivery. Setting aside the broom, Yonkai heads towards the contribution room. He was defeated in 6 challenges, so he will only have 4 points. As always, upon entering the room, he finds the treasurer, Meng, sleeping. He wonders which student he will be dreaming of this time. Yonkai raises his voice and calls him by name. Manhwa wakes up and recognizes Yonkai. Quickly, he hands over 10 pieces of silver in exchange for a contribution amount. The remaining 3 he keeps at Yonkai's request for future use to buy a tempered essence pill. Without erasing the warmth from his face, the old man advises Yonkai to return to where he really belongs. If he continues like this, he will eventually lose his life. Without looking back, Yonkai raises his gaze and responds that he has no other place to return to. Then, he leaves the treasury. The treasurer feels sorry for that boy. The tempered essence pill was his own invention to give Yonkai hope. Unfortunately, the boy believed his lie. We move to a place and see a village called Black Plum. Yonkai observed a meeting of types who surely don't plan anything well, being one of them a disciple of the High Sky Pavilion, taking away importance. He enters the rice shop where he usually buys and asks for a sack of rice. The seller smiles and asks him if that amount is enough for him as he buys the same amount of rice every month. Yonkai nods and comments that he sometimes hunts in the mountains to fight hunger. Listening to the conversation and seeing the thin body of the young man, the seller asks his wife to go to the warehouse for old rice that no one buys and to give it to Yonkai. Glad for her husband's kindness, the seller goes to the warehouse. Yonkai stays silent and thinks that the couple of sellers always find a way to give him rice every time he visits, and it's not old rice as they mention. He is very grateful to them. Once the rice is delivered, the seller asks Yonkai to visit if he's hungry. He doesn't have much but can give him some food. At the same time, 2 of the young men that Yonkai saw before entering the shop open the door and enter the establishment. A worker welcomes them, but one of the young men attacks him, making him fall. The owner asks why he did this. The aggressive young man tells the seller that he's a heartless show-off, accusing him of selling poisoned rice to virtuous men like them. The outburst is interrupted by the arrival of another young man. This time a student from the High Sky Pavilion who, upon hearing the situation, tries to hit the sick young man. The latter easily evades the surprise attack. Upon seeing this, the long-haired young man unmasks the sick young man's lie. If he were really sick, he wouldn't have been able to dodge his attack. The spectators begin to shout in disapproval. The fraudsters must receive their due. On his part, young Kai wonders at the scene in front of him. Nothing makes sense if he saw the three of them reunited before entering the shop. The troublemaker, upon seeing his situation, observes the High Sky Pavilion student, then declares that he admits defeat and does not think about going against such a talent from the High Sky Pavilion. Young Kai does not let him escape. Instead, he shouts at the audience not to let him go. If they don't teach him a lesson, he will continue to use his dirty tricks in other stores. Furthermore, he approaches the young man from the pavilion, calls him brother, and finally asks him in front of everyone to meet with him to teach a lesson to the swindlers. The young man's confidence disappears, being replaced by a frown. His plan has failed. He has to find a way for his allies to escape their current situation. Unfortunately for him, his allies are beaten and humiliated by all those present. As if the beating wasn't enough, Young Kai suggests shooting them so they don't commit any more crimes. His nervous sect mate asks him not to be so ruthless. Young Kai suspiciously examines him and comments that his determination is unbreakable, so he will end up with them. He also asks him if he knows them, otherwise he doesn't understand why he is so compassionate with criminals. Trapped and with no other option, the comrade decides to allow the elimination of his allies. His reputation cannot be harmed by making an assumption about his not very distant future. The henchmen stand up furiously. They call Young Kai's sectmate by his name Sumu and insult him for being a traitor. Without fear of consequences, he declares that everything was planned by Sumu, who would do anything to get the merchant's daughter. Sumu denies the accusations, but no one believes him. The merchant looks at Sumu with disdain and feels sorry for his parents. He tells him he should follow the example of his sectmate Young Kai, a nobleman. Indignant about the situation, Sumu decides to leave the place, albeit not without first looking and threatening Young Kai, and that sooner or later he will find him and make his life impossible. The merchant thanks Young Kai for his help and asks him to be careful with Sumu and bids him farewell. Back in his small wooden cabin, Young Kai doesn't waste time and starts training hard. Sumu didn't ambush him when he arrived at the High Sky Pavilion because the rules don't allow it. On the contrary, it's allowed to eliminate a student if there's a duel involved. Despite wanting to train without rest, Young Kai can only train 30 minutes daily with the techniques from the Black Book. Therefore, he decides to examine the book again. Upon opening the third page, he finds a small incense. According to the book, the incense can help with his training, but he needs to use the spiritual flower herb with 3 leaves and the withered herb, which are the 2 herbs required for his current stage. If these 2 herbs are inhaled for a short period of time, the body will suffer permanent damage. He could get them from the treasury, but they would be too expensive, so he'll have to find them on his own in the Black Wind Mountain. During dawn, Young Kai practiced the fist technique. Later, while sweeping the floor of the contribution room, the treasurer threw him a book about the medicinal properties of herbs and where to find them. Finally, he requested 3 days off and set off for his destination with a smile on his face. Upon arriving at his destination, he had to go deep into the mountain to find some withered herb. Tired of looking for herbs, he decided to eat to regain energy, but a column of smoke caught his attention. Following the smoke to its source, he found a fire and a family surrounding it. The father and son pointed their bows at the intruder, but upon seeing that it was a young man, they lowered their weapons and invited him to join them. The father introduced himself as Zhang Shan. He told Young Kai that he lived at the foot of the mountain, but occasionally entered the mountain to hunt and get food. Young Kai introduced himself as a disciple of the High Sky Pavilion and explained that he was collecting herbs. Shan's son has always wanted to be a disciple of an important sect but lacks talent, so it's an unattainable dream. Young Kai comforted the young man and recommended that he train on his own until he becomes strong. After his recommendation, Young Kai's stomach growled with hunger. Everyone smiled. The young man offered Young Kai some food, and the atmosphere became quite friendly for everyone. Finally, everyone slept without worries. Young Kai wakes up early, says goodbye to his new acquaintances, and starts training for 30 minutes daily, successfully reaching the 5th stage of tempered body. He ventures a bit further and catches a rabbit to eat, having traveled 10 miles. If he ventures a bit more, he will encounter very powerful monsters he can't defeat at his current level, so he decides to return. However, the screams of a man catch his attention and he ventures even further to see what's happening. Following the screams, he enters a cave full of spider webs where he finds Zhang Shan immobilized. The defenseless father desperately pleads with Young Kai to save his son, who was dragged further in by a demonic spider. Without hesitation, Young Kai accepts the request. When he reaches the end of the cave, he finds the spider, who immediately detects the intruder and starts to shoot webs, but when it sees Yongkai dodge, it decides to face him directly. They exchange constant attacks. Though the spider's attacks are painful, they are not deadly for Yongkai, who is full of euphoria. The webs are harmless, which is quite strange because a demonic beast would normally be invincible against someone at the 5th stage of tempered body. Perhaps it's already dying from previous events. Yongkai's strikes are enough to end its life. Without wasting a single second, Yongkai carries the young man and takes him to his father. Upon delivering the son to his father, he quickly leaves the cave and minutes later returns with some herbs which he chews and applies to the young man's body. Upon seeing his son stabilizing slowly, Jang thanks his savior with relief covering his weakened body. Yongkai brushes aside the thanks and tells Jang to take his son to the hospital if he wants him to survive. Jang agrees and starts to leave, but Yongkai asks him to wait a moment. He enters the place where he killed the spider, scans the scene, and heads towards his goal, spiritual 3-leaf flowers, which Yongkai noticed while fighting, a good reward for his good deeds. After collecting them, he discovers a different herb that wasn't in the book given to him by the treasurer. Without thinking too much, he decides to keep it in case it's useful. Finally, he accompanies Jang to the nearest medicinal pavilion, and fortunately, the young man is treated properly. In the Sky Pavilion, Sumu arrives at the area where Yongkai normally has his duels and is surprised to see many students there. One of his followers explains that Yongkai is beaten every 5 days in the same place, and students challenge him because he is an easy target. Hearing this, Sumu's mood improves considerably. However, Yongkai's absence triggers his departure. Tired of waiting, he heads towards a certain direction and stops in front of Yongkai's cottage, shouting and demanding that he come out to settle their pending accounts. But when there's no response, one of his accomplices enters the cottage to force Yongkai out, but comes out empty-handed. Yongkai is nowhere to be found. But this doesn't bother Sumu too much. He decides to burn the cottage to teach him a lesson, holding a torch and trying to raise the Despite Yonkai's training, Sumu has no fear. His confidence is backed by his status. Very few would dare to hit him in the sect. Yongkai also shows no fear in response to the provocation. Instead, he enters his cottage to store his belongings and comes out to attend to his visitor. Sumu, who calls himself Young Master, recommends that Yongkai kneel, ask for forgiveness and approach him as an honorable elder so he can preserve his life. Evaluating the situation, Yongkai calls Sumu's suggestion little filial. In the sect, Sumu's relative is an elder and his older sister is a central disciple, which could crush Yongkai with one finger considering her seniority. If Sumu is addressed as honorable elder, how should Yongkai address his older sister? Recalling her sister's character, Sumu starts to sweat and regains his composure. He warns Yongkai that if he doesn't apologize, he will regret the day he was born. Amused, Yongkai asks if he's being challenged. Sumu smiles even more because he has reached the 9th stage of body tempering, and Yongkai is not qualified to have a duel with him according to the rules. The difference in levels in a challenge shouldn't exceed 3 levels. Despite reaching level 5, he still can't fight against Sumu. Sumu and his followers burst out laughing at Yonkai's confident character, who is only level 3. A follower of Sumu asks the older brother Yongkai to face the one who is at level 5 of body tempering, as he is the weakest in the group and the most suitable opponent, even though he surpasses him by 2 levels. He addresses him as older brother due to the time Yongkai has been in the sect. Yongkai happily accepts Zhao Hu's request, with a smirk on his lips. The whole scene is secretly watched by Xia Ningcheng, showing disdain towards Yongkai. Zhao Hu recommends that Yongkai doesn't defend himself from the first 3 strikes and wants to give his older brother some advantage. In response, Yongkai happily accepts. Without any defense, Zhao Hu takes the first strike from Yongkai and is instantly knocked out. Sumu cannot believe what he sees and Xia Ningcheng falls from the tree where she was observing the fight due to surprise and disbelief. Yongkai's movement indicates that he can now use Kai lightly and is currently above the 4th stage of tempered body. A few days ago he was in the 3rd stage. Nothing makes sense to Xia Ningcheng. Yongkai regrets not controlling himself and not enjoying the fight. Sumu accuses Yongkai of cheating and says that this time he will let it go that he hid his true strength, but they will settle things in their next encounter. Upon seeing Yongkai leaving the place, Xia Ningcheng decides to spy on him to know his true cultivation, but unfortunately she does not find him in his hut. Upon seeing him taking a bath outdoors, she blushes and thinks he is a scoundrel for taking off his clothes in broad daylight without any care. She decides to return at another time. The next day, Yongkai sells the herbs found in the mountain and earns more than 20 contribution points, of which he uses 10 to buy banned herbs. When he leaves the treasury, he crosses paths with Xia Ningcheng and ignores her since he does not know her. Xia Ningcheng enters the treasury to inform her master of a great advancement. Upon arriving at his cottage, Yongkai introduces the herbs into the incense. The scent of the incense does not seem special to him, until after taking a few steps he almost loses consciousness. Fortunately, he manages to get up and train under the effects of the incense for 2 consecutive hours. He thinks it would be great if it lasted at least 15 hours. At the same time, Sumu and his followers plot something against Young Kai. In the morning, while Young Kai is sweeping as usual, a disciple approaches him to congratulate him for giving Zhao Hu what he deserved and tells him he himself had planned to do it. But the followers who support him generate fear. Young Kai has earned his admiration to the point that he asks for a duel to learn from him. Young Kai immediately declines, as he can't have another duel because he had one yesterday. The disciple is not discouraged and insists even more. He mentions that he hasn't had duels in recent days, so if the challenger is Young Kai, the duel can take place. As a response, he receives another decline. Desperate, the disciple promises Young Kai that he won't take away his contribution points if he defeats him. On the contrary, he will give him up to 10 times the amount of contribution points won in a duel. Upon hearing this, Young Kai accepts, although as a condition, he asks the disciple to go get some material. The disciple doesn't hesitate and quickly disappears. Sumu, who observes the disappearance of his follower, hears from another follower that Young Kai has asked his infiltrator for 10 herbs from the contribution room to carry out the duel. For Sumu, Young Kai has become greedy. If he loses, he would only lose 1 contribution point but has gained 10 points just for accepting the duel. What Sumu doesn't know is that the treasure Ameng is a lone shark. As proof of this, he sold each herb to Sumu's follower at 2 contribution points, double the price. Young Kai receives the herbs happily and starts the fight. The follower's palm strikes against Young Kai's fist. As a result, his hand trembles as if he had hit a rock. Ignoring the pain, he throws another palm, this time towards Young Kai's stomach. To his surprise, the palm is stopped by his rival's hand. Enjoying his attacker's surprise, Young Kai throws a powerful kick that sends his opponent into a state of madness. He quickly advances and unleashes a fierce punch on the helpless young man. In a weakened voice, he asks Young Kai to stop and admits defeat. Young Kai extends a hand to help him up and thanks him for the fight. Despite Lai Yuntian being defeated by a mere 4th-stage trial disciple, Sumu's anger is so great that he doesn't notice Young Kai approaching him. Startled, Sumu is surprised to see Young Kai behind him. Pleased, Young Kai comments to Sumu that he knew his previous opponent was an ally of his because he saw them together the day before. Resigned, Sumu disappears. Several days later, as a reward for practicing non-stop under the scorching sun, Young Kai has completed the first step in forming the Yang origin within his body. As he walked, he realized the dragon expulsion stream, where all the sex traders are exiled, emits a strong and immense Young Kai even greater than what was obtained from the sun. Taking advantage of the situation, he sits down and begins to cultivate to absorb as much Young Kai as possible, focusing so much on cultivating that he realizes too late that a man has appeared out of nowhere. Surprised, Young Kai abandons cultivation and respectfully greets the elder. He would never dare to be disrespectful to someone who may occupy a high position in the sect. The man asks Young Kai to address him as the 11th elder. Young Kai does not object and asks the 11th elder about the reason for the emergence of so much Young Kai from the dragon expulsion stream. The elder responds that it is because there is a treasure buried there. Additionally, the dragon expulsion stream was created by someone's sword strike hundreds of years ago when the Sky Pavilion did not exist. The 11th elder's ancestor passed through that area and encountered a strong and mysterious demon. They fought a great battle in this very place. When the fight was about to end, the demon realized he could not defeat his opponent, so he cut with his sword, creating the dragon expulsion stream. The demon jumped into the depths of the crack, but the ancestor followed with great effort and difficulty. Eventually, the demon was defeated, but the demon's force was so deep that even when his body and soul had perished, the ancestor did not feel relieved. That's why he founded the Sky Pavilion right there. He watched the crack for several decades. Once he made sure it posed no threat, he left feeling relieved. This is how the High Sky Pavilion was born. There is only darkness in the depths of the Dragon Creek, and many of the disciples who committed crimes have been exiled there. After a few days of non-stop cultivation, Young Kai manages to form his first drop of Yang essence. Feeling satisfied, he decides to return to his cabin. Upon returning home, he finds Xia Ningcheng sleeping in his bed. She wakes up feeling Young Kai's presence and blushing due to the awkward situation hands and explains to Young Kai that a hunter was waiting to give him a bag, and since he didn't show up, she asks Xia Ningcheng to give him the bag. The next day, Young Kai finds a letter at the entrance of his house, in which Sumu invites him to the Black Wind Forest. In the Black Wind Forest, to Sumu's misfortune, his group meets disciples from the Stormy Mansion. The rival group is led by Cheng, who asks Sumu to step aside. When Sumu's sect companion is ignored, a girl tries to escalate the situation with her comments. Sumu recognizes her as Humayer from the Blood Society. Humayer recommends Cheng to step aside. No one will think less of him. Cheng, who can't look weak in front of his younger sister Hu, gives Sumu a final warning. But Sumu doesn't yield to the pressure, so a battle between different sects begins. During the exchange of blows, Sumu realizes that his rival is in the initial foundation stage. Upon arriving at the meeting place, Young Kai observes a young man destroying a Sumu with great willpower. Despite being struck, he refuses to give up. Humayer asks Cheng to forgive Sumu as she likes people with strong willpower. Cheng almost does it, but Sumu warns that if he doesn't eliminate him now, he will seek revenge. With no other option, Cheng tries to strike Sumu with a rock, which is stopped by Yongkai before it could destroy Sumu. Amused by the intervention of another disciple of the Sky Pavilion, Cheng orders his followers to finish him off. Unfortunately for them, none of them can withstand the internal Kai coming from Yongkai. Cheng praises Yongkai's ability with a somber tone, then unsheathes his sword to end the opponent. Yongkai quickly raises his hand and uses his palm as a shield. Humair thinks Yongkai is a fool for being so careless. Back in his strange crazy mode, Yongkai smiles, forgets the pain, and strikes Cheng with everything he has, knocking him unconscious. He then approaches Humair and grabs her by the neck to finish her off. Humair explains that she is not part of them, but rather of the Blood Society and never attacked her companions. She also asks if he is as good at other things as he is at fighting. Analyzing the situation, Yongkai understands Humair's point but decides to give her a minor punishment because she was part of the provocation. After the punishment is carried out, he releases Humair and mocks her. Humair, who has never been treated that way by a man, quickly gets up, approaches Yongkai, and whispers that she finds him very attractive. Before he can respond, she leaves the place. Confused by the confession, Yongkai approaches Sumu, treats his wounds, and takes him to the Sky Pavilion. And that's how a long friendship begins. As proof of this, days later both of them drink, receiving a fine of 5 contribution points. Sumu orders his followers to sweep for Yongkai and fix his small house. He also tells Yongkai that Humair will try to seduce him no matter what. He congratulates him on his good luck and finally gives him pills to restore his Kai. Pills that are not very useful for Yongkai because he cultivates the art of pure Yang. The next day, Sumu shows Yongkai a market located in the Black Wind Forest. In summary, Yongkai learned that there is no 11th elder in the pavilion and it's rumored that the sect leader has reached the peak of immortal ascension and is the strongest man in the area. The leaders of the Blood Society sect in the Stormy Mansion are not a match for him. Sumu reveals a confidential secret. The leader took 2 people as disciples. The first was always flattered by the master, while the second was always strict. This caused resentment from the second disciple, who was weaker than the first and chose to cultivate a demonic technique which completely corrupted him. The first disciple was no longer a rival, so the sect leader made the decision to paralyze his cultivation. 10 years ago, the sect was filled with blood and the disciple escaped out of fear of retaliation. It is said that the sect leader does not show his face because he is torn apart inside. Hearing the story, Yongkai remembers the old man he met in the Dragon Mountain. To end the tour, Sumu takes Yongkai to his sister's house in the market. Suyen beats Yongkai for receiving a beating. After scolding her brother, she turns to ask Yongkai if he was the one who defeated Cheng. Upon receiving an affirmative answer, she advises him to stay away from Sumu if he wants to continue advancing. After making her brother look ridiculous, she asks everyone to leave the place. Sumu says goodbye to Yongkai and leaves, while Yongkai decides to wander the market in case he finds something of interest. Unfortunately, he finds Humair on the way. To avoid problems, he decides to ignore her, but Humair starts following him. Stopping at a booth, Yongkai asks about the price of a stone. Upon receiving the price, he doubts buying it due to its high cost. Tired of waiting, Humair interferes and comments that the booth he's trying to buy from is from her family. She tells him she can give a big discount in exchange for a condition. Yongkai, annoyed by Humair's intrusion, agrees to buy the item for the agreed price. The seller accepts and gives him a seed as a gift, completely ignoring Humair. Yongkai starts to walk, but seeing he's still being pursued, decides to scare her a bit and heads towards the depths of the Black Wind Forest. With a smiling face, Humair is a little worried about the direction they're heading in but decides to go forward, concluding that Yongkai just wants to scare her. The couple is secretly observed by Cheng and his older brother. Cheng has asked for his brother's help to finish off Yongkai for his good luck. Yongkai heads to his own grave and best of all, he takes Humair with him. Double prize. First he'll finish off Yongkai and then he'll play with Humair without knowing that danger is near. Humair asks Yongkai what he thinks of her figure. Yongkai responds that it's not bad but her personality is unpleasant. Indignant, Humair screams at Yongkai that he's a fool, also comments that if she tells her father she was humiliated, he'll be eliminated immediately. Yongkai shows no reaction. Instead he tells Humair that he'll have to eliminate her so she won't talk. The tense atmosphere is interrupted when Yongkai detects someone spying on them. With a cold tone he asks them to come out. Without any shame, Nutao asks Humair to stay away from Yongkai if she doesn't want to get hurt. Humair doesn't listen. Instead she approaches Yongkai and asks him to listen to her because they won't dare to do anything to her because of her status, and tells Yongkai that if he decides to face them he will surely die, as the enemy is at the initial foundation stage. Yongkai responds that he doesn't want to owe him any favor, so he decides to face them. Without fear, Yongkai tells Nutao that if he wants his life he'll have to find it. When he finishes his words, the pure yang art of his body is already active. To his surprise, in just 3 breaths he formed 2 drops of yang essence. Surely the stones he bought had something to do with it. Nutao attacks and clashes fists with Yongkai, resulting in his fist burning, while Yongkai takes most of the damage. Cheng, being weaker, doesn't stand still and draws his sword to attack the injured Yongkai. To his surprise, his sword is stopped easily and Yongkai shows no mercy, immediately using a drop of yang essence to create a hole in Cheng's forehead. Cheng falls to the ground, immobile, activating his madness again. He quickly attacks Nu Tao and uses his last drop of Yang essence to pierce his heart. To avoid being discovered, Yang Kai and Hu Meier eliminate all evidence and get to know each other a little better. Yang Kai reveals he has never killed anyone before, and Hu Meier confesses that she always acts provocatively to recruit members, but has never gone too far. She adds she won't bother him anymore and leaves. Days pass. Yang Kai cultivates and quickly improves his Yang essence. He also improves slowly due to dropping a Yang essence into the seed he was given by the seller, growing a strong and healthy tree. The tree bears spiritual fruits that enhance his cultivation, and he reaches the 9th stage of body tempering. He returns to the market to buy more seeds, but to his misfortune, the seller has no seeds available, but recommends he visit Miss Hu Meier. Her family is sure to have some. Without another option, Yang Kai accepts the suggestion and upon arriving, knocks on the door and presents himself for recognition by Hu Meier. Inside the house, Hu Meier explains to her older sister that Yang Kai was the man she had talked about, someone different from the others. The sister, believing that Yang Kai has hidden intentions towards her sister, decides to test him. She uses an invisibility technique on Hu Meier and takes her out of the game, then asks Yang Kai to come in. Upon observing Hu Meier, Yang Kai is taken aback as she has changed a little and seems a bit more attractive, but quickly returns to his usual indifference. The sister blames Yang Kai for being bold, as any other man wouldn't be so carefree in front of such beauty. Yang Kai breaks the silence by saying she looks charming. The sister, seeing no indecency in the young man's eyes, smiles. Yang Kai continues and tries to explain the reason for his visit, but the sister asks him not to rush, serves him a little tea to wet his throat. After seeing Yang Kai drink a little, she asks for his opinion on the tea. Yang Kai responds that it's first rate. Amused by Yang Kai's answers, the sister asks him to compare her to the tea. Without any embarrassment, Yang Kai responds that good people are better than good tea. Hu Meier is worried. She knows Yang Kai would never do anything wrong, but if her sister pulls a trick from her sleeve, nothing is certain. The sister asks Yang Kai to wait as she will go to get something. Yang Kai thinks something bad is happening but doesn't know what it is. Watching the sister go, Yang Kai blushes until the young woman's scream makes him react. He quickly stands up to see what is happening. The sister slips and falls on top of Yang Kai. He asks what happened, to which the sister responds that there is an insect. Yang Kai can't believe that a cultivator of her level is afraid of bugs. To calm her down, he eliminates the insect. The sister is surprised that even in her current situation, Yang Kai has not lost his composure. Continuing with her plan, she shows Yang Kai that she has hurt herself by slipping. Yang Kai decides to put cream on it to improve it. Taking her plan to the next level, the sister asks Yang Kai if he wants to do anything else with her. The hidden Hu Meier wonders what Yang Kai's response will be. Yang Kai ignores the question and tells the sister that he used one of his most precious possessions to heal her, so he asks her to leave the past behind and end her act. He knows she is not Hu Meier and is probably her sister. Surprised, the sister asks him how he found out. Yang Kai details several clues, but he keeps the last one to himself so as not to anger her. Furious, the sister asks him to tell her what she doesn't look like her sister and promises she won't get angry. With the promise made, Yang Kai responds that her butt is not proportionate, with one part being larger than the other, unlike Hu Meier's, which is well proportioned. The sister contains her anger and gives Yang Kai two options. The first, the hand that touched her must be cut off, and the eyes that looked at her must be plucked out. The second option is simple. He must leave the High Sky Pavilion and join the Blood Society. The sister has seen great potential in Yang Kai. Yang Kai refuses and reminds her that everything was caused by her. Showing understanding, the sister accepts and removes the technique hidden to Hu Meier. Finally, Yang Kai reveals the purpose of his visit, and on hearing it, Hu Meier asks him to accompany her to her family's mine. Upon arrival at their destination, Hu Meier introduces Yang Kai to her grandfather, telling him he is from the High Sky Pavilion and wants to enter the mine for something he wants to buy. The grandfather thinks Yang Kai has hidden intentions, so he decides to give him a lesson. Yang Kai becomes serious and prepares to defend himself, but a strange technique immobilizes him. When he is about to be hit, he frees himself. The grandfather is surprised that a young man with a much lower cultivation than his own was able to break free from his bindings, but he doesn't care and decides to eliminate him. Grandfather prepares a fatal attack, but Hu Meier intervenes to defend Yang Kai and scolds her grandfather for being unable to trust her. Resigned, the grandfather decides to leave but warns his granddaughter about the danger of trusting anyone. Before he can leave, Yang Kai yells that he will come back in 5 or 10 years to give him a beating. The old man smiles and leaves. Yang Kai feels relieved to have the golden skeleton body, otherwise he would no longer be alive. The grandfather meets with Hu Meier's brother to talk about the young man who is stalking the lady. In the end, they reach an agreement aimed at ending Yang Kai's life. On his part, Yang Kai receives the seed and says goodbye to Hu Meier. Due to being humiliated by Hu Meier's grandfather, Yang Kai spent a lot of time cultivating himself. As a result, he is about to cross the tempered body realm, but a bottleneck prevents him. Xianing Cheng, who has been spying on Yang Kai, notices two energies coming from Yang Kai, one corrupt and one pure Yang. The latter tries to suppress the corrupt one. Normally, no one should be interrupted when opening a path, but from Xia Ningchang's point of view, Yang Kai is different. He needs an intense battle to suppress his corrupt energy, so she decides to change to avoid being recognized and attacks Yang Kai from behind using a force equivalent to the third stage of the initial element. To her surprise, Yang Kai matches her force. Both fight on equal terms until Yang Kai tries to catch her to see more closely the mark on her face, which reminds him of an older sister. Displeased, Xia Ningchang uses her true force to break free from Yang Kai's grasp and escape. Seeing her escape, Yang Kai realizes that his opponent was holding back. At least thanks to her, he was able to overcome his bottleneck. Later, Yang Kai hears a commotion and decides to observe what's happening, encountering a strange scene where Sumu is being beaten by a disciple. Both their strengths are similar, but the disciple Y is using armor that protects him. Taking advantage, Y strikes Sumu continuously. Despite Sumu not showing any intention to surrender, Y doesn't stop. Sumu's followers show worried faces. Delighted, Y asks Sumu's followers to kneel if they want to save him. Sumu tells them not to, but they do so to save him. Y comments that he needs something more and the followers bow down further and plead for Y to show mercy. With tears in his eyes, Sumu shouts that he'll never forgive Y. Y mocks him and strikes him with all his strength. Later, Y orders his own subordinates to eliminate Sumu's followers. Yang Kai intervenes and destroys Y's subordinates. Upon discovering that Sumu has only fainted, Yang Kai approaches Y and introduces himself as a simple trial disciple named Yang Kai, challenging Y to a fight. Y recognizes Yang Kai's name, which has become famous, but reminds him that to have a fight, the difference in level shouldn't exceed 3 stages. Y is at the 3rd stage of the initial element, making it impossible. Pleased with his explanation, Y asks Yang Kai about his level. Yang Kai replies that he is at the 3rd stage of the initial element, making the encounter possible. All spectators are shocked to hear Yang Kai's level. Once everything is clear, the fight begins. Yang Kai makes the first move, but even his pure Yang can't damage Y's armor. Y mocks Yang Kai's failed attempt to strike, causing Yang Kai to lose his temper and return to his state of enhanced madness. He maximizes his Kai Yang, forming a liquid Yang blade which he uses to strike Y's armor repeatedly, successfully penetrating it. Y, losing confidence, tells Yang Kai that his grandfather is the supreme elder of the sect, and if he tries to harm him, his grandfather will eliminate him. Yang Kai smiles and tells Y that he will be the first one to be eliminated, as it's legal to defeat a rival in an official duel. He warns Y not to surrender, as he will be eliminated before he can utter the words. Turning his head, Yang Kai demands Y's followers to bow to him. Y orders his subordinates to kneel, but a disciple interrupts and strikes Yang Kai by surprise. Y is happy to see Kao and asks him to punish Yang Kai for trying to eliminate him within the sect. The followers of Sumu exclaim that it was a fight. Upon hearing this, Kao asks the other spectators if it's true, but they refuse to speak and leave the place, intimidated by Y's gaze. Without any response, Kao concludes that Yang Kai and the followers of Sumu are guilty and orders his disciplinarian comrades to capture them. Seeing Sumu lying down, he assumes he's also a victim who needs to be treated. Xia Ningchang quickly runs to the treasury to inform her master and ask him to save Yang Kai. MANHUA refuses. Xia Ningchang feigns anger and tells her master that she also refuses to go to the Ninean field, therefore her level will remain stagnant forever. Upon hearing his disciple's threat, MANHUA tries to calm her but she counterattacks, telling him that if he doesn't care about Yang Kai, he will surely abandon her when she's in trouble. She adds that Yang Kai has a great pure Yang attribute, so he has much potential. Upon hearing his disciple, MANHUA decides to intervene, but not before putting a condition on her. He asks her not to say she's in love with Yang Kai, as a man like him cannot hold back a woman with unlimited potential like her. Without waiting for a response, he leaves. Elsewhere, a follower of Sumu who didn't participate in the battle tells half-truths to Suyan about what happened. Upon hearing this, Suyan disappears. Inside the High Sky Pavilion prison, Yang Kai is separated from Sumu's followers by a guard and taken into a room full of guards who mercilessly beat him. Yang Kai tried to fight back but was repeatedly knocked down. Tired of fighting Yang Kai, the guards notice that the room temperature has dropped significantly. When they look back, they find Sumu's older sister, Suyan, who came looking for Sumu but, upon recognizing Yang Kai, decides to take him with her. The guards are relieved that they didn't incur the wrath of the older sister, but their relief ends when one guard discovers a flower blooming on another guard's uniform. Suyan frees each of Sumu's followers and leads them towards the exit where they are met by more disciples determined to stop them.